So hello and welcome back everyone. So today's video is going to be for the next chapter, chapter 3 on ethics and the environment. As you can see, I am streaming from my home office today. Hopefully the signal is good and we're able to stream the video. We'll find out by the end. So what I want to do is, just like last time, do a screen share of my slides. And walk you through the slides as I talk about the main points for the chapter. What I really want to focus on, rather than go over each and every concept, because the book does a very good job of going over the concepts with you, what I want to really talk about are the highlights from the chapter that I really want you all to focus on. Some things I will explain in more detail, and some things I might ask you to focus on from the book. So this chapter is all about changing work environment, the environment of a manager, especially legal and the ethical environment. Over the last few years, business schools have become very cognizant of the fact that ethical education should be an important part of a business school's education, because our graduates are going out there dealing with money, dealing with ethical decisions, sometimes on a day-to-day basis, depending on which industry they're in. And a lot of our graduates sometimes are not prepared to face those decisions. And so this chapter is really important to help our graduates get a little preview or an understanding of why ethics are important in business decision making, and where all does it factor in, and why. Why should we really care about ethics? So one of the biggest reasons why we should really care about ethics is to first understand who all is the company, or should a company be responsible to. A lot of times people say, employees, shareholders, those are the only people. Customers and shareholders is the answer that I most often get. But that's not really true. A company is responsible to its stakeholders. And now I want to make sure everyone understands the difference between stakeholders and shareholders. Stakeholders is a bigger group. It's a group of people whose interests are affected by the organization's activities. They could be members of the organization or not. As long as they are affected by the organization, they're stakeholders. Shareholders are people who actually own a share of the company. So shareholders are a kind of stakeholder, but stakeholder is a much bigger group of people. So if you look right here in the next slide, it shows you the different stakeholders an organization has. Most of the time people focus on the internal stakeholders because those are the easiest to think about and figure out. Well, yeah, internal stakeholders are important. They're just as important as external stakeholders are. If you look carefully, employees, owners, and the board of directors are the people who are making the organization work at a much more upper superficial level. We can tell, it's obvious to us. But if you look now at the next group of people, the external stakeholders, these are the people, the customers. Without customers, the company doesn't really exist. Without suppliers and distributors, the company would shut down, perhaps. These are much easier to understand stakeholders. What about competitors? Why are competitors stakeholders? Well, competitors can be stakeholders when, if you as an organization are doing something that's affecting the industry as a whole, competitors are affected by it too. So a small example I want to give is a few years ago, when that flight vanished above somewhere in the Indian Ocean near Malaysia. That did not just affect that particular airline whose flight or plane went down. It affected airline industry as a whole. Whenever a big accident, a plane crash like that happens, or a plane vanishes, it affects tourism. It affects hundreds of people who may or may not want, who may have been considering flying, and they get scared a little bit. So when tourism is affected, other competitors of that airline are also affected. So competitors are stakeholders as well. Lenders are stakeholders. That's easy to understand. You know, if a company has taken a loan from a bank and they go under, that loan will never be repaid to the bank. So banks do care whether a company survives or not. And you know, banks are affected by the company. How are political legal forces stakeholders in an organization? That's a little harder to understand, and that's the stuff that helps us understand why ethics are important even at a national level, not just at a community level. You know, customers are important, yes, unions, lenders, distributors, they're all important, but an organization doesn't just exist for them. An organization, a company, exists in the community that it is based in. So if this organization is polluting, it's affecting that community that's living there. If this organization, so take Enron's example, when Enron did all those unethical things, it necessitated the politics and the legal system of the United States to look back and pass the Sarbanes-Oxley bill. And so in a way, the company Enron affected the political legal forces of the country at that time. So everything in the environment, whether it's the immediate environment or the environment that's a little bit more distal, is affected by the organization. So an organization really needs to think, who am I responsible to? Is it just my employees? Is it just my board of directors? Or is it just my bank? Not really. An organization is responsible to all these forces around the environment, the community, the people that sustain it, the planet that sustains it, the country that sustains it, the legal system that is taking care of it. So company is responsible to a lot more people than just shareholders. So that's an important distinction to understand. Once we understand that, ethics vis-a-vis business becomes slightly easier to understand as well. One of the things that I really stress for my students to understand is that for the modern manager, it's really important to understand that it's not enough for you to be ethical. You need to understand ethics, and you need to make sure your employees are ethical as well. So let's first talk about the first portion, which is you as a manager understanding what ethics are. What are ethics and values? I don't want students to confuse ethics and values. Ethics are the systems or standards of right or wrong. Values are inherent beliefs. There is a cyclical relationship between ethics and values. Values of a culture or values of an organization will determine ethics or ethical standards. Ethics is nothing more than morality or moral standards. So values will inform moral standards, and moral standards will inform and affect values that are held by people. One of the biggest questions that students struggle with in the classes is, are ethics something that you learn? Or is it something, or is morality something that you're just born with? Or is morality something that you learn as you grow up? The simple answer is you learn. Ethics are learned. You're not born with the standard of good or bad. You're not born to know you should share. Your parents help you understand you need to share that packet of candy, or you need to be nice to your brother or sister. These are values, and ethics are inherently learned. You're not born with them, which is why you can increase your ethical compass. You can become better at making ethical decisions, especially when you're faced with ethical dilemmas. What is an ethical dilemma? Well, the book says an ethical dilemma is a situation in which you have to decide whether to pursue a course of action. Now pay attention please to this portion. Pursue a course of action that may benefit you or your organization, but that is unethical or even illegal. Right? So should you, years ago, the question was, should you outsource? If you outsource, it's going to benefit your company. You're going to save the money. But it may be unethical because remember, one of the stakeholders for your organization is the local community that you are situated in. And if you outsource, you are effectively making all those people in your local community jobless and unemployed. You are affecting the economy of that local community. So it is unethical, but it is going to help your organization, right? So that's an ethical dilemma when you have to choose to do something, choose between doing something that may be good for you and at the same time maybe illegal or unethical. But is that a complete definition? Do you really agree that ethical dilemmas are when you have to choose between doing something legal or illegal when it's going to probably be good for you personally? Not really. That's just one half of the definition, so to speak. Ethical dilemmas are also when you have to choose between pursuing two courses of action, both of which may benefit your organization, or both of which may be the right thing to do. Or when you have to choose between two decisions, both of which may be the wrong thing to do. A CEO whose company is, let's say, situated in another country, has to decide between paying a ransom for the employees who were kidnapped or following the law, the American law, which says, kidnappers are treated as terrorists and we don't negotiate with terrorists. And so if the company pays these kidnappers, the company is breaking US law, federal law. But if the company does not pay the ransom to extricate these employees, they might effectively lose the lives of these employees. Those are two right decisions. Two decisions, and you can only take one. That's an ethical dilemma as well. For most of you, thankfully, you will not be faced with those kinds of life-altering ethical dilemmas. You probably will be faced with whether I should do this action that might personally benefit me, but it might be unethical. And how do you respond to that ethical dilemma is what would truly make you stand apart as a good leader and as a good manager. So there are different approaches. Now, how do you solve this ethical dilemma? There are different ways to do this. There are different approaches that people can take. And these approaches are what are called our ethical paradigms or ethical frameworks. So the first approach is the utilitarian approach. The utilitarian approach, in simpler terms, is greatest good for the greatest number of people. Usually when you're using this approach, you're looking at, is it okay for me to sacrifice these 5 people so that I can save 500 other people? So an example I would give you would be an organization that is going through tough financial times, and the decision they have to take right now is, do we fire 10% of the people so that the company can get back on its feet and retain the other 500 people who are still working, or 5,000 people who are still working? Or do we keep doing what we're doing in the hopes that we might be able to make it back? So utilitarian approach, remember now, each of these approaches that I will talk about are just different ways of solving your ethical dilemma. No one approach is necessarily right or wrong. They're just different ways of approaching a problem and solving it. So the next one is an individual approach. An individual approach is guided by what will result in the individual's best long-term interest, which ultimately are in everyone's dilemma of I want to live with myself. That is an individual approach. You're looking So justice approach will look at what is fair to all parties concerned in this particular situation. So when you're making a decision in an ethical situation, you're looking at what is the best course of action that would also be fair to everyone. So over the semester, you will learn that I'm a big sci-fi fan. And one of the shows that I really enjoy watching is Star Trek. And I was watching this episode recently, which reminds me of the justice approach, because in the episode, they show that there is some alien being who comes aboard this spaceship and asks the captain for asylum because this person wants to commit suicide. And the reason they want to commit suicide is they've been put in a jail. They've been confined for hundreds of years, and they just can't live this life anymore. They don't want to live this life anymore, where they're hungry and without companionship, without health. At the same time, the society and the country that this person comes from approaches the captain and says, well, you can't do that. Because if you kill this person, it will have moral implications and repercussions for our society. It will change our society in ways that we cannot even imagine or understand. So it would be wrong of you to give this person asylum. It would be wrong of you to give them the place to commit suicide. And the captain has to now be the one to judge or decide what to do. That's an ethical dilemma. And what the captain does is look at a justice approach. What is fair to both parties in this particular situation? And that's the justice approach. So where did all these, why did business schools start thinking about ethical dilemmas and ethics education? One of the biggest reasons is that over the last 2 decades, the number of white-collar crimes increased. In fact, at one point, I don't know if Hulu still does, Hulu had these episodes available that were called American Greed. They're very good series of episodes, so if you can get your hands on them, either at Hulu or wherever they're available, go to them. The movie, it's called The Smartest Guys in the Room, something like that. And so the Enron movie is a really good watch as well. So if you can find time, find that movie and watch that movie, or any of these documentaries that show you how the greed for money actually blinded people against legal standards, ethical standards. Now, ethical standards are higher than legal standards. There were people who were forgetting both ethical and legal standards. So Enron scandal resulted in Sarbanes-Oxley. What happened with Martha Stewart when she was sentenced to prison, insider trading. There have been a lot of white-collar crimes in the last 2 decades that have really shaken up the business world. Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme was another example. And so all these cases and examples really drove home the point that it's really important for organizations to stress, and business schools especially, to stress that ethics has to be given more importance, much more importance than just money. organizations, years ago, people used to think the only job of business is to make money. Not really. That thinking is changing now over the years. What is a business's or an organization's job? It's, yes, to make money without sacrificing its social responsibility towards the stakeholders it has. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Let's first talk about the fact that the second portion of what manager needs to do in 21st century, you're not just trying to be an ethical person yourself, but you also have to promote ethics in your organization. So take a minute and think about, how can you promote ethics in your organization as a manager? Your book gives a number of ideas, but the one that I want to leave you with is, be an example. Most of the culture is top down. Employees see their managers, and those of you who are working will notice that that's the case. We see our bosses, we see our supervisors and managers and the way they behave and their bosses behave. And that's how we learn and get cues on how we are supposed to or expected to behave in an organization. So if you want to see change, if you want to see ethical behavior, it's really important to set a right example. It has to be top down. So a small example I'm going to take is Wells Fargo. So those of you who are not familiar with the Wells Fargo case, just look up ethical violations and fraudulent accounts that Wells Fargo employees opened. And no matter what Wells Fargo says, when you look at how many people were opening fraudulent accounts, how many of the Wells Fargo employees were opening fraudulent accounts, it indicates a culture of a lack of ethics. And so it becomes really important for managers to understand, what's the message we're giving? Am I telling my employees, you need to make your numbers this week, I don't care how you do? Or am I telling my employees, I really want you to make your numbers, but if you are struggling, come to me, let's figure out what's going on. Maybe I have unrealistic expectations for you, or maybe you need more training. So it's really important to understand how you are giving your message to your employees. Now, there are two portions, right? As a manager, you understanding how you are ethical and behaving ethically and promoting ethics. There's another portion when you're being ethical, that is a social responsibility, and the idea of corporate social responsibility comes out of it. Social responsibility simply refers to a manager's duty to take actions that will benefit the society or the interest of the society as well as the organization. You should not be doing anything to hurt the organization necessarily, but you should be doing things that are beneficial to the society. Corporate social responsibility is a notion that corporations are expected to go above and beyond following the law and making a profit. So you're not just as an organization, as a business, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Target or Wendy's, you are expected to go above and beyond the law. Following the law is minimum. And this will be obvious when you look at Carroll's global CSR pyramid. Archie Carroll is a former professor of mine and an alum. And I love this pyramid because it makes it really easy for the eye to take in what is corporate social responsibility and where does it stack up. So if you look at this pyramid, these are the levels or the ranking of the responsibilities of an organization. Very basic responsibilities and economic responsibility, right? If an organization can't even make money, if a business can't even make money and you are running in debt, you might as well close the doors. Don't even think about anything else after that. But if you are able to, you're fulfilling your economic responsibility, what you need to look at is, am I following the law? That's really important. You have to follow the law. Till about 2 decades ago, businesses thought that's all they needed to do. Make money, maybe follow the law. Today, the CSR pyramid, all the research on social responsibility, corporate social responsibility is actually showing organizations that they have to reach to the top right here. Let me see if I can find a pointer. Right here. That's where, let's see. that's where, right there is where we want organizations to reach. Not just fall here, no, get to this point, and from there get to philanthropy, which means following the law, obeying the law is the bare minimum that an organization should be doing. If your organization is standing at the bare minimum, that's equivalent to a D- in a class. You need to go beyond that and be ethical. Do what is expected by your global stakeholders. So a small example that I will tell you is that when we cover the chapter on human resources, we will see how there's no federal protection for sexual orientation. Title VII doesn't really give federal protection for sexual orientation. However, many organizations have come forward and said, we will not discriminate against an employee based on their sexual orientation, whether or not there's a federal law for it. Or there is no federal provision for a paid maternity leave in the United States. A lot of organizations have come forward and said, we are going to give 10, 12, 28 weeks of paid maternity leave, whether or not we are required by law, because we think that is what is ethical as an organization. That's what's good for our employees. So ethical responsibility goes beyond the law. And remember, laws, especially in a democracy, legal system usually falls behind ethical system because it's a democracy. It takes a while for the legislature to get the majority, get a bill passed. So by the time a bill passes and becomes a law, society's already moved on to the next standard of ethics. So it's really important not to limit an organization just to the legal responsibility. After the ethical responsibility, the highest is philanthropic responsibility. Philanthropic responsibility is not just being ethical, but actually actively being a good global citizen, contributing towards your community. So when organizations or companies have they donate money, or they go out and volunteer, or do things that actually help their country, or help their community, or help a specific underprivileged section of society, they are being philanthropic. This is a really good pyramid to remember, not just for companies, but for as an individual as well. You have to follow these steps and follow these ladders to in order to be a good global citizen and a corporate citizen as well, right? And one of the questions companies usually ask, does any of this CSR, corporate social responsibility, does any of this CSR hype really help the bottom line? I've had students in my class, especially in the graduate classes, ask me, why should we worry about ethics and philanthropy if that's not going to make me money? Sometimes it might even cost me money. Why should I worry? Does it really make me money? There's more and more research over the last 10 years that is showing actual financial gains by being ethically and philanthropically responsible company. We are seeing that companies who are doing good things for the environment, who are doing good things for their society, are actually making more money as well. And one of the biggest reasons is because people are asking for that. Consumers are asking for companies to be more socially responsible. Consumers are asking companies to understand that you can't just make money, break the law, be unethical, and think nothing's going to happen. No, you are a citizen, just like an individual citizen, and you have responsibilities as well. And which is why one of the biggest things in modern day is, are you environmentally sustainable? And are you a company that is looking after the environment? And I will give you an example that really hurts me sometimes. There are companies that will not recycle or reuse components, and the customers probably aren't asking for it. They probably haven't been slapped with any fines or citations. That means they're probably only following legal responsibility. For companies today to really show that they are global citizens, they are ethical citizens, they have to go beyond that and look at, am I being green? Am I being sustainable? How much am I polluting the environment? How much? Every step and every action that the company is taking should be evaluated. The final part of this chapter looks at corporate governance. Corporate governance, plain and simple, looks at how can I trust a company? How can I trust this company to be doing the right thing? Is it doing the right thing? And corporate governance helps. Corporate governance pretty much involves board of directors. The board of directors are the people who are independent directors who are they represent the shareholders. They are nominated or elected or voted in by the shareholders, and they represent the shareholder interest. And what they do is they oversee the CEO or the top management team of the CEO as well. But there is really a need for independent directors. A lot of times we've seen that on the board, the CEO will find a friend and appoint a friend to be a director on the board of directors, or chairman, even worse, even to be the chairman of the board of directors. There is a conflict of interest. There's a clear conflict of interest there. So it's really important. More and more research is showing us, strategy research is showing us clearly how it's really important for board of directors to be independent. That's really, really important. All right, then we're done with this chapter. Oh my gosh, it seems that what happened? All right, I'm going to finish the chapter. I'm going to watch the video and see when it stopped showing you the slides. Oh my gosh, I may have to re-record it. If that's the case, I will re-record it and post it for you. So until next time, bye.